Uncle C, back in the office, and you guys seem to enjoy these story time videos that I explain when I talk about my early 20s, when I had most amount of fun, so to speak, with women, and ultimately some of these S3X stories that I've had to share with you guys. And to be honest, to be frank with you, these aren't scripted. This is raw, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old game. So I titled this one today, I even wrote down the title on my phone. I titled this one, The Number One Sex Secret of the Female Mind. So in order for this video to make sense, we have to take you back to a little story time, okay? This was a summer of, man, what summer was this? This is what I mean. You can even tell I even really have to think these through to know what summer it was. So if I graduated high school in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, summer of 2018, I want to say, that sounds about right. There was a party, and it was a ways out of town. This party that was a ways out of town was upwards of 50 miles. So basically when everybody drove out to this lake, everybody had to sleep there. So people brought tents, right? People slept in sleeping bags. Like, it was outside, it was in a big like cornfield. Okay, I live in North Dakota, so the parties were more rural. Now, the reason why I titled this The Number One S3X Secret of the Female Mind is because this will all make sense by the end of it. So that night, right, I will even contact some buddies and see if I can get, pictures or videos of me in the tent, hanging out real late, 2 or 3 in the morning. If I can, I'll put them up on the screen right here. But regardless, I went there with a bottle of Stoli, and I went there to party, and I went there to pull, okay? We were hanging out. It was middle of July, and everybody was having an absolute blast, right? Like, there was probably 200 to 300 people there. And instantly when I went there, it was like the perfect vibe, right? The music was right, everybody was outside, and the women were obviously very flirtatious and very fun. So this was still one of the number one memories that I'll never forget, because when the sun started to go down at about, 7:30, it started to get dark. What I was doing is I was hanging with my friends, and I was just going from group to group to group. Okay, so this is for all of you who are into game, or those of you who are into cold approach, or for those of you who are into, you're trying to get better at speaking and developing your charisma, right? The only way to do it is with repetition. So that night I probably ended up making out with probably 5 to 10 girls, and the first few approaches group to group before the women were actually warmed up as well, they were rusty, right? They were rough, and it's because everybody's getting loose. I think the biggest thing that a lot of guys have to remember when you get rejected is that women don't necessarily have the best social calibration either. There's so many guys, they put so much stress on themselves with game. They say, was the context of my speech not correct, right? Did I not say the right thing to engage her interest, right? Was my game not on point enough? Did I not flirt enough? Did I not pass her test quick enough? Did I not up her objections enough? Like, you gotta understand something right now. Women have social anxiety too, and women get nervous during interactions too, okay? But here's what happens. As you approach more and more women, not only does their buy-in temperature go up, but ultimately your comfortability and your buy-in temperature goes up as well. The first couple groups me and my friends were talking to, it was a little rusty, right? They were more awkward, I was more awkward, but here's what happened. Approach number 3 comes, and I'm chatting to women, right? Start making out, things of that nature. Maybe I try to pull, maybe I don't, but regardless, we had a great interaction, right? But the night's still early. Go to the next woman, go to the next group. We're drinking, we're having fun, people are doing shots, right? So what happens? Well, you make out with one more. Pretty soon then you're in the back of someone's truck or SUV. Like, this is basically like high school to college level partying to the max. Like, people were just having fun. But here's what happened. After making out with 4 or 5, 6 women, what I started to notice is that not only was my charisma extremely high just from repetition and from game and from practice, but what you have to remember, if you're solely trying to understand female psychology and understanding how to brush up on your game as best as possible, is that a woman must feel comfortable. And as the night went on, these women kept being more and more comfortable, okay? I'm gonna get to what the number one secret is here in just a second. But let's dive in. When I came to like probably the 5th or 6th woman that I was talking to, it was like within 2 minutes of making eye contact and talking, like we were making out, you know, hands were going all over. All of a sudden, like I'm back in like a sleeping bag with her, fooling around, and you know, within 20 minutes, we're hooking up right then and there. And the funny thing is that when a woman really categorizes you as like the type of guy she wants it with now, it's like she feels no shame because it was in the moment and it was the interaction was hot and heavy and she enjoyed it. But she was even telling her friends afterwards that, like, the thing is like there was no guilt or there was no remorse because there was raw, genuine desire here. I'm going to get to the number one secret here in just a little bit. But before we do that, you have to understand something. For those of you who are so concerned about being high value, the women that I approached that night had no idea what I was about. They had no idea how much income I made. They had no idea if I was high value or high status or not. None of that. All they could do was gauge off of personality. Same with the woman that I ended up sleeping with within the first 20 to 30 minutes of just getting to know her and saying hi, was the fact that a woman, right? A woman has to feel an emotional pull. The second she feels that emotional pull is the second that she ultimately will be ready and willing to do some of the things that you want to do, but is maybe not necessarily good for her or for you. Here's the number one sex secret that a woman will not tell you of the female mind, is that her buy-in temperature, meaning her S3X threshold, how turned on she is transferable from guy to guy to guy. What that means is if that interaction with that girl would have been at 8 p.m. instead of 11, there's a very high chance that that would have not ended up in a pull. There's a very chance that would have not ended up in any sort of intimacy. There's a very high chance that that would have not ended up in anything. But because she was probably hit on by 4, 5, or 6 guys prior to me, before there was other guys already raising her seduction level and raising her threshold, when I happened to pop in at the exact moment, it all of a sudden didn't matter, because a woman ultimately, a woman has to release into your frame or submit essentially mentally first before she can let go and do all that stuff physically. So once she made the mental cognition or the mental switch that she's ready and she's engaged right then and there, it was like no holds back. She's ready to go to the tent or to the place where I'm at, to my little, you know, fort that I set up, and it's like, do me right now and do me dirty. But here's what you have to remember, despite women not telling you that, right? You have to understand this. You can be as high value as you want. I don't care if you make $20 million a year. I don't care if you have a big old following on whatever effing platform you want. If you can't talk, if you can't convey conviction, if you can't convey game the correct way, if you can't look a woman in the eyes and make her feel something and ultimately make her feel something right then and there in the moment when the attention is all on her, you will not have any success and she's not going to have any chemistry. Here's the fact that there's a part 2 to this, okay? I genuinely believe that men are leaders of every single interaction. What I can tell you is this: after that happened, I didn't, just because I pulled and I slept with a woman really fast, does not necessarily mean that I was fulfilled, and neither was she. She probably left that tent not necessarily feeling good, and I definitely left it feeling like I did it, but it's like, should have I? Probably not. Here's what I can tell you. A woman is only promiscuous if there's a man for her to be promiscuous with. Men lead and women follow, and the older I get, the more I'm starting to truly understand that there is repercussions mentally and psychologically for carrying yourself a certain way that ultimately leads to S3X intercourse and ultimately leads to S3X promiscuity. You have to understand, men are the leaders and men set the precedent. So when you're a high value man, the biggest reason why you will see so much promiscuity, you see so much infidelity, is because high-value men have made it okay. Instead of high-value men today setting a standard for women and saying, hey, you will have access to us if there's loyalty, if you cover up certain, like if you present yourself nicely, if you show loyalty, if you show care, if you show motherly traits. But what happens is women who show skin and ultimately get drunk and party, men are so dumb. Like, they're easily seduced just by the flesh. Men are easily seduced and locked in a trance just by shape, just by beauty. And because of that, these high-value men at the top who are charismatic, who are confident, who do make good money, who are leaders if they could be, they're giving that high-value traits and aspects to all of some of the lowest quality women out there possible. So because of that, you have to understand something right now, is that just because these secrets that I'm displaying to you work, just because holding masculine frame, understanding red pill truths, just because holding that frame and even understanding front end game and banter with women, just because it works, just because you can raise a woman's attraction level, does not necessarily mean that you should. I can't stress this anymore. Like, just because you have the ability to pull does not necessarily mean that you should. Every single body that she has to rack up and take on, it makes her harder. It makes it harder and harder for her to live a genuine life. It makes it harder and harder for her to actually have a guy that finds her, that she wants to have a family with, and ultimately it makes her harder for her to actually live. It's psychologically damaging. And if men are the leaders and women are ultimately the vulnerable ones who can be seduced, like, I can't tell you, like, if I pulled that chick in 20 minutes after meeting her and all of a sudden we're doing everything, what that shows you is that women are easily led astray. And if women are easily led astray, what I can't stress enough is it's not hard to get laid. It never has been. Once you crack the code and can talk, like, it's seriously not hard. Because of that, because you know they are led astray quickly, I genuinely believe if you're a high value man, it's your job to be stronger than your pleasures. It's your job to be stronger than your desires. It's your job to not necessarily have S3X be a vice that holds you. Because what you are seeing today is you're seeing high value men who are not in control of their pleasures. Their pleasures are now in control of them. You're seeing high value men addicted to money just for the status. You're seeing high value men addicted to status just for the validation of women. You're seeing the validation that they have, the validation of women giving them, inflate their egos, and ultimately them leading women down the route of promiscuity, so that way they're tarnished and the man is actually lowering themselves and not necessarily happy either. Like, you have to understand, it stems from the top. Until men put their foot down and finally say, listen, what we're doing isn't working. Despite what we're doing, feeling good in the moment, busting here or there, like, it's not necessarily good for us, that is the only moment that the times and that the tables will turn. And I'm even starting to really see that learning game, right? Diving into how to speak to a woman in a different language, an emotionally driven language. It's a man ultimately tapping into that feminine energy. And ultimately it makes you weak because it naturally, subconsciously pedestalizes the female just to get a connection. You should be able to hold masculine frame and she should be in her feminine energy. And because of that, the two worlds should come about. But the reason they're not is because women today have so many options because men are willing to bend the knee and please at just the drop of a hat. The number one trait of the female mind, the S3X secret that women will not tell you, is that their buy-in temperature can change from man to man, and depending on where you get them at the interaction is dependent on their emotional state, and they will go with you if the time feels right. It has nothing to do with how high value you are. None of those girls I made out with that night had anything to know about me, and ultimately the woman that I slept with that night didn't either. But because I was right guy, right place, right time, and the stars aligned, she was willing to do it. But just because I led her down that path, or just because I led myself down that path, it doesn't mean that I should. And I think that a big standpoint for men and their maturity nowadays is to really understand that, hey, these things we're doing, these things we're learning, despite them working, they have serious repercussions. And that's why for 2022, my goal is to change how a high value man carries himself. My goal for 2022 is to change the precedent on the standards that a high value man has, so that way we can restore peace, unity to the dating game, and ultimately men and women can thrive at a level inside of relationships that they have never been able to before. And that is the purpose of being a full stack head man. Fellas, if you like this video, I want you to hit the like button. I want you to comment and subscribe if you enjoy more of these stories, right? And we will see you in the next one.